Africa in 1967. Here's the train, the new train going by. The SG that wanted to go through my house, but I saved the house, or we saved it. Anyway, I arrived in 1967, 51 years ago, in Africa. And I was first in Nigeria, exactly 51 years ago yesterday. I arrived July 4th. And my first job, my main job, was to try to feed people who were starving in Biafra that had broken up away from Nigeria, and they were having the civil war. So it was my job to try to feed people starving in Biafra, which was a terrible civil war. Then I quit that job after 2 years. I went to Paris. I bought a Volkswagen bus, and I drove across the Sahara, where I saw a lot of the mud architecture like my house is designed from. And then I went back to Nigeria. Then I drove across from Nigeria, across the Congo to Kenya. And I arrived here in 1970. And I wanted to see some place that had not been so colonized. Even in those days, people were not really in touch with their own culture. So I went up to I got a permit and went up to the northern frontier. And I stayed there 3 months. And I lived mostly with the Turkana. And I was so fascinated about how they used everything in that environment, harsh desert environment, to make their utensils and their jewelry and everything. So I decided I wanted to make a collection of everything they made. Beautiful designs. So I sold my bus and I started collecting things. And when I got to Nairobi with my collection, they said, my friends at the embassy said, "Oh, you must have an exhibition, because they don't even have these things in the museum." And so I had my first exhibition in Nairobi in October 1970. 1970, of Turkana things. Those are some of the things. And the only African there was Joseph Murumbi. And he was the first foreign minister of Kenya and the second vice president. And he came up to me after my lecture and said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, probably look for a job." And he said, "Well, would you go back to Turkana for me and make a collection like you have?" Because he was the only serious collector I ever met, African collector. And he collected everything, books, magazines, music, artifacts, textiles, everything he collected. So I said, yes, I think that would be a good idea, that somebody of his stature wanted to preserve their culture. So I went back to Turkana the second time. And that time, the Turkana would take me on crocodile hunts. And when they kill a crocodile, I'd get the teeth and the backbone, and I strung the teeth and all these things that they use for making jewelry. Dik-dik toe bones, ostrich egg shell. And then we melted down cooking pots, the sufriyas, the cooking pots, and made ornaments and earrings and things. So I had a pile of things, and I decided I had to learn to make jewelry, to put them together in order. So I went down to Mombasa, and I met a Peace Corps volunteer from the U.S. who had set up a workshop for Kenyans that had been traumatized in serious accidents like fires or car accidents. And the only requirement that they had to have one arm or one leg. And I had all my limbs. I was the only one with all my limbs. So I joined that class, and I brought my things down from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Mali, small things that I combined with the Turkana things. And a woman came in one day into that workshop, and she started tearing her hair out. She was so excited about my jewelry. She said, "Oh my gosh, what are you going to do with these things?" And I said, "I don't know, put them on my wall." She said, "No, you have to have an exhibition. You have to share this with people." So we went back to Nairobi, and I had my second exhibition in 1971. And that day that I was setting up the exhibition, a wealthy Texan walked in, a Texas oil man, and he started pulling things off the wall, and I said, "Wait a minute, I don't know if I want to sell all these things." And he said, "But I want them all. And I want the boards, I want the walls, I want this room." So he bought the room, and he packed it up, and he said, "Do you have any more at home?" So I took him to my house, and his wife came, and she said, "George, I only have one neck." He said, "These are not for you." She said, "Well, who are you buying them for?" And he said, "Well, have you ever seen anything like these?" So she sat down on my floor, and she started reading the cards and looking at the photographs, and she said, "No, I guess I haven't." So they bought them all. They took them to Dallas, Texas. They converted their swimming pool into a store, and the cabanas around it into packing rooms. And he said, "Now I want you to get busy because I want to represent you." So I did lectures through Neiman Marcus galleries and a lot of other galleries in America. And then I went back to Kenya, and I rented a horse stables in Nairobi and hired some craftspeople who I'm still good friends with. And we started the African Heritage Jewelry using all African components. So one day Murumbi came in to the workshop, and he was very angry because he had a legendary temper, but he was a very gentle guy most of the time. Anyway, he was angry, and I said, "What did I do to you?" And he said, "Well, I went by a shop today in Nairobi, a shop owned by an Indian, and I saw a big mask in the window from Guinea." And I said, I went in and I asked the owner, "Where did you get that?" He said, "Alan Donovan sold it to me." And I said, "Oh, sorry, I needed money. I lost track of your contact. Let's go see him." We both knew him. "And I'll ask if I can give the money back to him, and you can buy the mask." So that's what we did. And he bought it, and that same day he said, "It's my dream to set up a Pan-African center in Nairobi. I have traveled through all the African countries setting up the commissions, high commissions, and embassies, and I know there's such a vast diversity of talent and culture in the African continent." He was a Pan-Africanist, and he said, "I want to set up a center where people coming to Kenya and local people both can appreciate the talent in this continent and the vast diversity of what we have to offer." And he said, "Would you help me do that?" And I said, "I'll stay another year." So that was in 1971. Anyway, the first gallery we set up burned down, and we lost everything in 1976, the biggest fire in Nairobi ever. And we lost all our workshops, all our stock, everything. So it took me some years to recover and start rebuilding. But I didn't tell you about the mask. We decided that Nimba mask from Guinea would be our logo. So that is the African Heritage logo, and that's what brought Murumbi and I together. And that's how we started African Heritage, and that logo became very famous in Nairobi and around the world, because eventually we became the biggest exporter of our arts and crafts in the world from Africa. And when I closed down African Heritage, I had over 500 people working full-time. And I had several thousand working on commission basis. And of course, we also started a festival in 1976. So I met a lot of musicians, models, dancers, acrobats, and other people that traveled around with me. So that's how I started.